Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Over the weekend, maybe the most significant news outside of the teams playing in the Super Bowl is what Jay Glazer reported on the Fox Super Bowl pregame show. If you missed it, here it was.
I do have some breaking news right now to report on the show. That's what we do. And it involves another Super Bowl MVP, and that is Aaron Rodgers. And guys, I've learned that Aaron Rodgers flew back to New Jersey this week to meet with the Jets about his future. Met with the team head coach and the GM, only to be told that they want to move on from him. Now, the thing is, what does Aaron want as player or not? What happens? Do they trade him? Do they cut him? Whatever it is, but the fact that Aaron actually used his own plane to fly there to find out what the decision probably means that Aaron still wants to play another year, just not going to be for the Jets.
Okay. Now, I know some of you will probably roll your eyes, throw your hands in the air, and say, this is stupid, but I'm going to have the conversation about if the Saints should kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers. And I'll tell you why. Because I do believe, and I am consistent with this, almost consistent to a fault, anytime that a player becomes a free agent, any general manager worth their salt, insert Mickey Loomis joke here, should ask the question, can we get that guy? I mean, let's not forget that Pat Riley got LeBron, D-Wade, and Bosh all on the same team because he was able to make it work. Like, you can't do it if you don't at least ask the question. You should at least explore it. I'm not saying this rivals that. I'm just saying on whatever scale of improbability, measure it, okay? Now, I'm not telling you that they should bring in Aaron Rodgers, but what I'm saying is you should ask the question. You should have the conversation internally about what that would look like. Now, for whatever it's worth, Rodgers is 41 years old. We know the drill. He spent the last 2 years with the Jets. His debut season lasted all of 4 plays. He ruptured his Achilles, came back this year, and he just wasn't very good. The Jets were, a 5-12 football team. Rodgers had a QBR of 48.1, 11 interceptions, 28 touchdowns. He was 25th of 32 qualified NFL passers in QBR. He was not very good. But the Jets weren't very good. And there were glimpses, there were flashes of the old Aaron Rodgers. But what is the norm? It's a fair question. I think it's also worth noting that on ESPN's NFL Countdown, Rex Ryan, remember, who interviewed for the Jets job, had this to say about Aaron Rodgers in that throughout that process of interviewing for the Jets job and what that conversation about Rodgers was like.
Well, let me just take you inside those walls because I did interview for that job, and a lot of questions came up. Very few of the questions were about this man's ability as a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, we all know he can still spin the football, all right? But it's the other things. The commitment. Is this man committed to the organization? Is he going to be at all the mini camps? Is he going to be at all? It should never be a question. Should never be a question. And the other things, are we comfortable with him doing the Pat McAfee show or this show or that show or whatever? Basically, you're saying this because it's an organizational decision, not just the head coach. All right, but do you want Aaron Rodgers to be the face of your franchise, or do you want it to be Aaron Glenn?
It's a really interesting perspective from Rex Ryan, and clearly the Jets have made that decision. They're moving on. I don't know what their plan at quarterback's going to be, but it's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. So when it comes to the Saints, and if the Saints should kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers, here's what I would add. There's a series of questions that I would follow, and it would go like this. Number one, if healthy, are the New Orleans Saints a contender? You got to start there. And before you roll your eyes and say no, let me remind you, so we have the exercise. Saints looked pretty good when they were 2-0 and they were healthy, didn't they? Can we agree on that? Now, I get it. You beat Carolina and Dallas, who were 2 awful teams, but you started 2-0 and did so emphatically. If healthy, if Eric McCoy's healthy, if Alvin Kamara's healthy, Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, if everybody's healthy, are you a contender? I don't think so. I don't think so. But they may have a different feeling, basically judging on how the Saints have operated. Number 2, is 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers a better option than Derek Carr is today? I think that's also debatable. Now, Rodgers this past year threw for 3,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 11 picks on a bad team. But those numbers are still better than Derek Carr's. Now, I could see a scenario, and this is a strange parallel, but remember what happened with Brett Favre when he left Green Bay and went to the Jets for one season and was bad. In Brett Favre's one season with the Jets, he threw 22 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. The football world thought he was cooked. He was done. What happened? A year later, he goes to Minnesota. They go 12-4. He throws for 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and gets the Vikings to the NFC Championship game in New Orleans against the Saints where they lose in overtime. Came back in 2010, ran it back once more, and it didn't go so well. But the point is, when everybody thought Favre was cooked after the year in the Jets, went to Minnesota, found life. So, could it happen for Rodgers? Maybe. Next, okay, if you think, because you could cut Derek Carr, designate him as a post-June 1 release, save 30-some-odd million against the cap this year. Then you look and say, okay, well, what would it cost to bring in Aaron Rodgers? The great thing is, this sounds like the Jets are going to cut him, probably as a post-June 1 release. They'll eat a $49 million dead cap hit. Don't care about the Jets. But to get Rodgers, you wouldn't have to give an asset. He'd be a free agent. You could sign him. What would he sign for? Very likely, you'd only be interested in a 1-year deal. What would that 1 year be worth? 1 year, cash, all that sort of stuff. You could even do what you always do. Low cap hit, high signing bonus, spread it out, whatever. You make it work financially. If you believe you're a contender and Rodgers makes you better than Carr, you could do it. And I love that you don't have to give up draft assets to get him. He'd be a free agent. Then the other question becomes, would Aaron Rodgers pick you? What would the market be like for Rodgers? So look around the league and who has a quarterback situation where they're looking for a starter. And that list isn't very long. And then you look at that list and you also look at, okay, what's that list look like among contending teams? And it's also not very long. Like, if you're looking around the NFL at teams that could be interested in Aaron Rodgers. Cleveland. And they're not contending for anything. Pittsburgh. Do they bring back Russ? What do they do with Justin Fields? You have that conversation, but Pittsburgh could be in the mix. Indy. Although you've got Anthony Richardson, are they committing to Richardson moving forward, or do you want to bring in Rodgers? That's a question, but Indy could be. Tennessee needs a quarterback, but they're terrible. Las Vegas needs a quarterback, they're terrible. The Giants need a quarterback, they're terrible. And then you've got the Saints. And I would argue Pittsburgh would be at the top of that list, but next on that list would be the Saints. So I don't think it's a far cry that Rodgers could be interested. But for New Orleans, it would have to be a question of what does it cost and are you a contender? See, I am very much okay with a bridge year. Like, I am convinced that this team is not a contender and won't contend. They're going to have to go backwards to go forwards. But if they're not going to do that, and you have a roster capable, listen to me, if you have a roster capable of getting you to 8 or 9 wins with Derek Carr, can we agree on that? Like, if Carr's healthy, Olave, Shaheed, Taysom Hill, everybody's healthy, right? Which you weren't this year. But if everybody's healthy, could you get to 9 and 8? You were 9 and 8 2 seasons. You won 9 games 2 seasons ago. Under Dennis Allen, you won 9 games. So yeah, you could get there. Could Aaron Rodgers get you from 9 to 10 or 9 to 11? You win a bad division, you're in the playoffs, hosting a playoff game. Like, That's a doable scenario, I think. Now, I don't think that's the best scenario. Let me be clear. I think the best scenario is you cut Derek Carr, you eat it for a year, you get your cap right, you're picking in the top 5 next year, which would be a loaded quarterback draft class. You draft your franchise, you spend in free agency, and you start to build organically again. That's what I think is best. But I don't get to make the decision. And if you have a front office that's still committed to winning now, which clearly they are, you're bringing in Kellen Moore, likely. Is Aaron Rodgers a better option at 41 years old for a year or two than Derek Carr at this point in his career? And yes, it's all the things Rex Ryan talked about. It's the McAfee show. It's the what's the thing he does? The dark retreats.
Yeah, the darkness retreat in the cave.
What's it called?
In the Oscar,
like Ashwanda or something like that.
Yeah,
look it up.
His retreat.
The darkness. I want to know what that word is. The darkness retreats that he does. Got to deal with all that. Is he going to show up? Is he not going to show up? Mini camp, OTAs, whatever. You got to deal with all that. But is he a better option than Derek Carr? I think he is, even at 41, because he's always had a higher ceiling. I know what Derek Carr is. I know where Derek Carr's ceiling is. It's not as high as Aaron Rodgers. Now, can Rodgers ever approach that ceiling again? I don't know. What I do know about Derek Carr is his ceiling is lower. So if you want to go for it in 2025 with Kellen Moore and a healthy roster, you really want to go for it again, Aaron Rodgers is a better option than Derek Carr, as long as it's affordable and you have a long-term commitment to it. I would prefer you go in the tank, because I'll eat it. I will eat a year in the tank knowing that I'm going to be better long-term for it. I'll take 2 steps backwards to take 10 steps forward. I just don't believe the Saints as a franchise are willing to do that. That's the difference. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.